Welcome to the New Bedford Light Chat. This is Jack Spillane, and we have a really exciting program tonight. We're going to talk to the team behind the $32 million Whaling Museum expansion. It's a really exciting project. It'll be across the street from the Jacobs Gallery at the corner of William and Bethel Street, and will be a large terracotta and glass building, just a really exciting building that's going to give the museum a chance to bring all kinds of national exhibits to the area. So tonight we have as our guest Amanda McMullen, the president and CEO of the Whaling Museum. Welcome, Amanda.
Thanks, Jack.
We have Stephanie Randazzo Dwyer. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Stephanie. She is a principal with Mercado Silvetti, the builder, and also an architect. And we have Austin Ward, who is one of the architects on the project, also from Mercado Silvetti. And we have Ashley Payne, the director of tourism for the city of New Bedford. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Jack,
so
so
much
much
for having us.
So to start right off, I think I'll go to Amanda. Why is this the project for the museum to do now? Why did the board and the staff decide, let's go for this?
It's a great question to kick it off, Jack. This was a very deliberate process that went back to 2022, actually 2021 when we acquired the property. And then we selected Machado Savetti to work with us in 2022 to do a campus master planning process because the board really wanted to be intentional and strategic about this. Sort of building just for the sake of building was not our objective, and wanted to plan out through this campus planning process what would physical growth look like for the institution for really almost 50 years out. And we found great partnership, obviously, with Stephanie and Austin from MSA, and they conducted, gosh, I think it was an 11-month planning process with us where we opened it up to the community for conversation. We had lots of different focus groups and deeper dives of what were the real programmatic needs institutionally and how could our physical space support those needs. We ultimately came out with 4 different phases and went back to the board and sort of kicked around what would be the best first phase to kick off. And it was very intentionally, and it was with a punctuation mark that the board said, it is the property across the street at William Street, which was really going to let us elevate our feeling of welcome and bringing people into the museum and into the city in a really hospitable and engaging way, but allow for this dynamic exhibition space that we were sorely needing for our rotating shows.
All right. So I read in Arthur Hirsch's great New Bedford Light story that the Whaling Museum will now be the biggest exhibition space south of Boston. Is it fair to say that the museum is expanding into new areas of exhibits? So it's been a long time since it was just whaling.
That's another great question to kick it off because it's one of my favorite things to answer. I always remind people that the New Bedford Whaling Museum is not actually our name, and we were founded as the Old Dartmouth Historical Society in 1903. We are a DBA in the New Bedford Whaling Museum, and obviously being in New Bedford and a historic society, whaling is central to our mission, our narratives, our scholarship, and our collection, and we will never run from that story. I want to make that really clear. But since our founding in 1903, actually, our first artifacts that we ever collected were all items of either natural history or fine art or folk art or indigenous art. And so since then, we have really continued to look at our interdisciplinary model that tells the stories of this region through art, through history, and through science. So I like to say that this building is an extension of that. It's not something new. We have always done fine art shows. We've always done cultural and historic shows, and we've always done natural history shows and displayed our scientific heft, if you will. So it allows us to expand on all of those narratives and collections.
So specifically, what kind of shows will this bigger building allow you to bring?
So our rotating shows that have been really dynamic for sure and bringing in greater visitation have definitely been leaning into the categories of art, fine art, folk art, decorative arts, across the boards there. But all of our exhibits, Jack, if you take, we had a landscape show a couple summers ago, 19th century American landscape. That show is a perfect example of the way our curatorial team will weave together what could be on surface a fine art show, but it's laced in with culture, history, and science. There was an environmental exploration within that show, looking at coastal erosion. There was a deeper dive on where were the women artists in that exhibition. And so you could walk into that show and just experience absolutely stunning, breathtaking paintings, but you could also have a layered experience to go a little deeper and understand some of these other narratives. And that show's a great example for this new building because that show ended up traveling for us and going on the road to Minnesota. It actually just returned last year from its traveling show.
Uh-huh. So this next question is for Stephanie in Austin. It's a handsome new building. Can you tell me what your goals were in the designing of it?
Sure. I'll start. Austin, you feel free to chime in. I think, as Amanda had mentioned, this is the first project that was conceived in the master plan, and it's both a bookend to the campus at Cross William, but it's also been thought of both globally, like how many people are coming to New Bedford from all over, especially with these traveling exhibitions, but also very locally in the community of New Bedford, the National Historic Park. How does this new building sit within a National Historic Park? And really that view down William, that historic view to the double bank, that was a very important driver, as well as a really challenging issue to deal with. And I think something that we enjoyed dealing with is how do you connect a campus across a street without physically connecting the building, right? So it is across William from the campus, and I think we've all put a lot of effort and thoughtful work to sort of connect accessibly across William for visitorship, and also really creating a welcoming plaza for the whole city of New Bedford at this terminus of the historic park.
And I think that
So
piece,
the,
the terminus location, Jack, really at the end of William Street, is one of the most defining pieces of this project because while it is a beautiful building and we think it's a beautiful building and going to be an amazing space to experience, it's also a really wonderful site project in a way that this project's going to be able to connect in the urban fabric, in the streetscape, the historic structures, the candleworks, the double bank, the existing campus, the museum, all of that playing together in what is already a remarkable city streetscape. And we're overjoyed to be able to add another piece to a long legacy of wonderful buildings and projects in this town.
so it seems like it must have been a little bit of a tricky challenge because that building a contemporary building in a historic district like the National Whaling Historic District, where you have this double bank building, this iconic Greek Revival, am I correct? Type
Yeah.
architecture that is just a signature look of the city. You don't want to hide that by building across the street, I suppose. So how did you solve that problem?
Sure, there's a lot of site planning elements. I can go over a few that are just really basic ones, like stepping back the building to allow that axis so that, so that when you are up William, and you look down, our building sort of sets back a bit so that it's not blocking the view shed. Just general, really good practice, things about scale and rhythm and massing. The building is, it looks to its neighbors for the height and the sort of rhythm of the facade. Just being a good neighbor in that regards of it's a contemporary building, but it's also fits in with its context.
I'd also say, Jack, this is I think one of the reasons we were a really good fit for the museum, both in the master plan and this building, is this is something that our practice has really built a strong portfolio in nationally and internationally, working with significant historic structures and places and being able to delicately weave in contemporary programs. And so one of the conversations we've had a lot with Amanda and the museum staff is how do we make this project fit in but stand out at the same time? That while this is a contemporary program and this is a very specific moment, this project wants to be timeless in the same way the streetscape of William Street is timeless, and that these two things, this dualism of this moment and then this larger narrative of time, have to be in sync. And so that's always at the forefront, something we come back to as we think about details, as we think about the skin, but also these larger site planning moves that Stephanie was talking to.
Now, building across William Street, I've heard that there was some talk, Amanda, about going with a elevated walkway or
The
some sort
Sky
of
Bridge.
Mhm.
Yeah,
yeah, some sort
that
of
came.
connection
So
that probably would have worried a lot of people. But on the other hand, I'm wondering, is the connection, because you're going to need a connection as people
yep.
go back and forth, are they going to take the traffic off that block of William
Mm.
Street or the parking? How is exactly is, because it's a Belgian block or cobblestone
Mhm.
street. People are curious as to how this is going to work.
Let me tackle the first part of your question, and then I'll have Austin and Stephanie jump in on how we solved it with this connectivity and the accessible crosswalk in the plaza. But the reason there is no skywalk is frankly because in 2022 we opened this up for community conversations, and we did hear, I will say it was maybe 4 or 5 people, but they were loud voices. And we respected their feedback. Obviously, they were folks who represented the historic conditions and the historic development of the city and the historic downtown and the park. And so that's an example of the museum saying, okay, we've heard you, and we're going to be able to figure this out differently. And that's frankly where we turn to Austin and Stephanie, who, there's nothing like designers and how they solve problems. So they came up with, okay, we can't do that. Let's figure this out. And so you guys can maybe speak a little bit to the way you've been able to create this sort of city square and completely accessible crosswalk, which has almost become better, frankly, than what we had originally thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, just to build on what Amanda had said, I think William Street, that last leg of William Street is quite sloped, right? It's pretty inclined. It's not very friendly to a person in a wheelchair. So I think, or many people in general, just mobility challenges. And so one of the first things we did when the Sky Bridge came off the table was to really look at how to visually connect and sort of create a smooth and accessible transition for everyone from one door from the existing campus to the new door. And so these two doors really talk to each other. They're on axes and it's a very straight shot across William. We'll also be changing. So basically the whole William Street slope is resloped to allow for that table, so to speak, that clearly comes across the street. We are removing some parking on William, all the parking on William except for a bus drop-off, pull-off space, so that students can be safely let out of a bus and to go to the museum, and then the bus will leave. But no vehicular parking, which really makes the street a little bit more pedestrian friendly. And then lastly, the materials. We are definitely keeping the cobble for the majority of the street, but for that small piece where it connects from one entrance to the other, we're going to make that a bit smoother, friendlier stone transition that will also speak to the cobble. But
So no traffic and limited parking and a flatter slope.
Just to insert there, cars can still pass through. It just will be narrowed without parking on the side, but
I see.
There
it
you go.
still will be open to traffic.
Important clarification.
thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And it's one of those things where, as Stephanie was saying, the existing grades on sidewalks don't meet accessible slopes for a majority of this block of William Street just due to the historic nature of the way the city formed. But one of the really thrusts of this project was to fix the accessibility issues even within the larger campus of that block, as well as to link these two front doors so that universal accessibility is provided, and so that individuals of all mobilities really have a really easy way to navigate this block and this part of the city, and definitely between these two different buildings of the campus. I think this for us as a design team was like forefront, because one of the thrusts that Amanda gave us day one was, how do we make this campus more welcoming? How do we improve accessibility and the entrance and the idea of welcome, not just for New Bedford citizens, but for all visitors who might have never ever even visited New Bedford?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned accessibility, because anybody who's ever walked in the historic district of downtown New Bedford knows that as beautiful as the cobblestones are and important, they are not easy to navigate for a person in a wheelchair or other abilities. So that I think will be important. I want to go to Ashley Payne for a bit. Ashley, these new national exhibits coming in, this bigger campus, how important is that for the city's tourism industry?
It's incredibly important. So when we talk about the Whaling Museum and a lot of our marketing for the city, the promotion for visitation, the Whaling Museum is that anchor institution that we have here in New Bedford. And so to see this expansion, to see more coming into the city is just a benefit for bringing people to the city. Amanda mentioned earlier all the different topics and things that they have within their exhibits is great for us from a marketing perspective, because that means we're able to target our messaging to so many diverse visitors who will be coming to the city, whether they're looking for art, history, science. It's just makes my job easier for sure.
So I grew up in Peabody and Salem on the North Shore, where the Peabody Essex Museum was a somewhat similar museum to the Whaling Museum when I was growing up. It was focused on the East India trade,
Yep.
with when Salem was a big maritime center. And about 25 years ago, they added this huge contemporary wing, and they integrated it with the other building, and they bring just wonderful contemporary art shows to the Salem area now. Is the PEM any bit of an inspiration for this expansion, Amanda?
I mean, I'm a museum nerd, Jack. So every museum is inspiration for me. I love the PEM, and know Linda, the director now. She's actually came down last summer to visit and see our show that we had last summer, The Wider World in Scrimshaw. Um, and before her, actually, Dan Monroe, who was the executive director, who led a lot of that institutional revival, if you will, and building and renaissance. I got to spend a day shadowing him when I first started in this job, and learned a lot from him, as I did from others in other big institutions that were very generous with their time. I think their growth is definitely something that lots of museums have noticed. There are certainly parallels to the Whaling Museum, to New Bedford, sort of city to city, if you will, in terms of parallels for opportunities and growth. I think the difference for us here is we're carving out a little bit of a niche in terms of being a historical society. And I do always kind of go back to we were founded in 1903 as a historical society, because I find the lane that historical societies can play in across the interdisciplinary model to be very authentic. And I think that's what we're doing so exceptionally well. So I think there are definitely parallels to their growth and their visitation. I think PEM, I've learned a lot for how they really particularly look at that visitor experience. I think they led the way on that particularly. And the Gardner Museum is another one that has looked really carefully about creating those welcome spaces. So they serve as great inspiration along those lines, for sure. I think curatorially and from a scholarship standpoint, we may diverge a bit more, but I can understand why people see the connection.
Yeah, these small, mid-sized museums, they have so much to offer and
Yeah.
inspire. We have a question coming in from David Richardson. He says he often uses the handicap, and this relates to what Austin was talking about in accessibility. He says he often uses the handicap parking spaces on William. He uses them to go to Tia Maria's, the coffee
Right.
shop around the corner. Will there be an alternate handicap spaces nearby?
Yes.
You want to speak
There
to that,
will
Austin?
actually, that was a great conversation we just had. This was part of the great collaboration with the city, with the Historic Commission, the
Hmm.
Planning Board, and also the Zoning Board. Stephanie or Austin, you guys can talk about where we've been able to carve out a couple ADA parking spots.
Yeah, go ahead, Austin.
Yeah, I
Take
think
it. Yeah.
what this is, like Amanda said, a really wonderful just relationship and development in the site planning process with city. So we carved out two locations on Bethel Street, actually. Bethel Street actually happens to be the flattest portion of this whole part of town, particularly this block. And so we could get it truly universally accessible and completely flat two parking spaces on Bethel Street. And we're working with the city and the Historic Commission to implement like a stone paver that's like a smoother finish, that's the same speed, like, same granite as the cobble, but would actually be an accessible surface. So it actually provides an improvement to the ADA parking spaces that are there. And this is really wonderful because this is a little bit precedent setting for the historic district in terms of this development. We looked at other models like in parts of Lower Manhattan where they have building blocks as well, and they're trying to solve these issues of like a 21st century city that is coming up against the friction of a 17th century fabric. And so we think it's a wonderful challenge and a unique sub-story, I would say, in the larger story of this project. We're really excited about it.
David Richardson also wants to know about the construction schedule. I know that
Mhm.
you folks have announced that you're going to demolish the, I still refer to it as the Hiller Printing Building, but they're
Yeah.
different things. It's a one-story industrial type building. And then after that, so what is the construction schedule?
It's on it. It's coming, but it is still a touch premature to say because we still have to work out a lot of logistics and the planning pieces. But we're definitely in the site mobilization zone is somewhere the end of April, I believe, was the last I had heard. Stephanie or Austin
Yeah.
could speak to
Yeah,
that
that's
differently.
correct.
And by that, that means fencing will go up and obviously demolition and any abatement will take place immediately following that. So late April, but likely more early May. We are having a neighbors meeting. We've had several neighbor conversations. We have another one coming up on March 26th at 5 p.m. So we certainly welcome anyone to come in. That one will focus very specifically with our owner's project manager will be there to talk about the logistics planning.
That's 5 p.m. at the Whaling Museum,
5 p.m. March 26th.
March 26th. Okay.
Mhm.
And so it sounds like it's not really a firm date yet for construction, or demolition will begin in the spring.
That's accurate. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Um, Ashley, is there fears that there might be some effect on tourism while we go through this? Like any other construction project, it does cause some inconvenience.
Sure. I mean, there'll definitely be some disruption, but we have parking garages available in the city. Sometimes people forget about that. But I think we'll be able to continue on as normal and be able to work around everything.
And I'll just jump in also. I mean, I'm with you, Ashley. Parking garages are great. They're super convenient. They're a block and a half from us and many others. What we consider it to be full operations while we're under construction. I think one of the reasons the board thought this was such a good opportunity, in addition to what the programmatic benefits would be and the outcomes, but it also allows us to not be shut down entirely. So some of the other campus master planning thinking had different renovations within our existing spaces, which would take the museum offline for months to a year at different times. Though that's not happening. We will be up and running, operating normally. We will probably have to reroute school buses, we're pretty sure, and the school groups will come in a little bit of a different entrance, but we'll be up, open, and functioning.
Really good to hear.
Yeah.
I wonder if we can talk about the building itself with the architects and builders. So and you correct me if I describe this incorrectly at any point. It's a two-story glass and terracotta structure. It looks to me, when I first saw it, I thought that they were red bricks,
Mm.
but it was later explained to me that they're a pinkish terracotta. Talk a little bit about how you decided on that.
Sure, I'll start. Yeah, it is 2 stories above ground. The primarily the first story is a fair amount of glass that leads to all the community spaces and the retail and the cafe. But the upper portion that is housing the temporary exhibitions is fairly it's the terracotta band, and I would say this team has done a lot of study on color in the city. Um, just hundreds and hundreds of hours of research and looking at the surrounding colors and stone and brick and granite and things around the historical district. So although terracotta I think is very it's no it's very commonplace and historic times. There's a lot of buildings in New Bedford that have terracotta, but we're really using terracotta in a very contemporary way. So it will we think the best combination of both historic and contemporary at the same time. So it's a very profiled shape, and there's many different types of shapes. And then as the sun hits it, as you go around, it's a very dynamic effect on the facade.
Mhm.
Yeah, Stephanie was saying, Jack, it's one of those things that when we started looking in New Bedford, the most significant buildings, cultural and civic buildings in New Bedford, they're formally very clear, but they're materially and detail wise very rich. And so this is something that we really we loved and we drew on very intentionally, is what Stephanie's saying. And so the gallery volume, that second floor that's clad in terracotta, is really this vessel for exhibitions and experiences, this kind of large, very clear figure that will present itself in the round. This building, unlike, let's say, the Double Bank, for instance, which is singularly experienced almost exclusively in that access down William Street, this building will be seen in the round, depending on which street you approach, whether you're coming from Elm or coming down Johnny Cake. And so what we love about the terracotta, which is this really traditional material done in a contemporary way, is that it's going to have a sheen and a shimmer and a glow, and the texture and the light play that you're going to get throughout the day is going to be quite remarkable. And it's going to be something that I think really draws on the details of adjacent neighbors and really fits in a really wonderful way to the district.
Is the red and pink color designed to play off the large amount of bricks in the historic district?
Yeah, there's definitely true that the red as a body is definitely a color that you see all throughout the district, but it's also the dominant color of the museum campus. Now, the museum campus as a whole doesn't have a singular red brick, and you'll see if you walk, it's 10 buildings. But the red is definitely an important piece, I think, of a figure standing in and fitting into the district as a whole. The sort of deep red, sometimes almost ochre color that you see in some bricks throughout the district. And we felt that that was important to ground this building where it is in many ways. And it's also a really intentional move to frame what is a really wonderful white building at the end of the street of the Double Bank. So it really, if you look at that perspective down William Street, it helps to sort of bookend, as Stephanie talked about earlier, the two sides of the campus and frame that really historic, significant building at the end of the street.
I had one observer of the local scene. Of course, people always second guess any design, as you guys, I'm sure, know. Asked me about whether the large wall of pink terracotta could have different motifs because it is
Mm.
terracotta. Does it have to all be the same? I'm not saying that that's correct. That's just one person observing. What do you
Mm.
think?
Well, Jack, I did a not such a great job explaining too that there's about six panel types on on the terracotta facade. So the six types do two things. One, it gives you sort of an economy or an efficiency um, because you're just making six types, but the six types are done in such a way that you can get a huge variety in the way that you place them on the building, right? So there will be that variety and movement in the facade, um, perhaps a little bit more subtly than what you're talking about, but there is sort of a variety of profiles and shapes in the terracotta as you go around the building.
Yeah, and it's a glazed terracotta, which I think is important. It's we've been working with a manufacturer out of upstate New York called Boston Valley Terracotta, who we work with for many years now, and they developed some really amazing, intricate ceramics, and really it's an artistry, Jack, if I'm being quite honest. Some of these are going to be very smooth and textured, or smooth and sort of sculpted, I should say, and then others are going to be a bit more textured and flat. And it's this contrast of these two things, the smooth and this rough, that we find really important. If you think of like the Customs House, the base is all kind of rough, but the columns are really smooth. So this is a contrast that's present in all the historic buildings throughout the district, and something that we wanted to pick up in a contemporary way and in a new way in the facade of this building.
Yeah. So we have one person who's watching. He asked me if we can put up some images of uh, uh, the design. I don't know, Dave Cuddy, our producer, if you have those available, and we can put them up. If not, you can see them on our website. How is the fundraising going, Amanda? I've heard
Mhm.
that at one point a three-story building was perhaps envisioned. I know there's a lot of projects, the Criterion, the wide MCA expansion.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Fundraising is actually, so we started, the Capital Campaign Committee was formed in January of 2024, and we have now raised almost 23 million. So I would
Wow.
say by records of my 30 years in nonprofits and fundraising, that is an extraordinary momentum. And it really shows, I think, the excitement that people have over this building when they're hearing about it, not only how it will look, how it will fit in, but what its purpose is. And by bringing more people in, by allowing for more exhibiting of even our contemporary creative artists in the community. So I think what the building will do and how it will fit in are exciting for people. Um, the I think people get really jazzed, Jack, when we talk about the fact that last year we brought in over 82,000 people to our doors in New Bedford. But part of the magic of this building is we were talking about these rotating shows that open here with our collection and then hit the road. And last year we had three different traveling shows circulating all over as far west as Minnesota and up and down the eastern seaboard. And that meant close to 60,000 people experienced the New Bedford story through our artifacts, our scholarship, and our narratives outside of Massachusetts, outside of our borders. So to be able to make an impact of the New Bedford story to 140,000 people last year is just proof that this excitement around this building is contagious, and the fundraising is certainly resulting.
Was there a possibility of 3 stories at one time?
There's a lot of possibilities in this building. I think there were like different elements that did get thought through. There was a top level that was almost duplicative of what our Harborview Gallery is, quite frankly. It was an event space. And this is where I think I'm so fortunate with my board of trustees because there's not a lot of boards that will sort of be like, well, let's not go overboard and let's be restrained. And frankly, it wasn't restrained from the cost. It was restrained from the purpose. We could have built, I mean, Austin and Stephanie would know, I think this building could be many more feet, if not like double the
Double.
height that it is. And we chose not to with intentionality. We chose not to sort of say, just because we could raise the money and build a third floor, why would we when we have a replication in our existing building? And we frankly want to continue to feed people into the existing space. Harborview Gallery has one of the most gorgeous lookouts in the entire city. So why build it twice? And that was one of the great things that our board, I think, was just smart and strategic and showed restraint on.
Uh, Jacob Ventura is sending in a question. Will there be opportunities for public to have input on the project? Well, I think, Amanda, you said that there already have been some listening
We
sessions.
did start in 2022, so I'm sorry that Jacob missed any of that. We're certainly happy to, I mean, I'm happy. I'll talk about this building with anybody that wants to know more about it. So I am happy to sit and, certainly the New Bedford Light previous article had a lot of nice images and a great understanding that Arthur was able to capture from the project. But we are not yet in the public phase of the capital campaign. While we're in the public phase of the permitting, those are two different things. We will eventually be probably not for 6 months or so where we have a website on our website itself where there's going to be more information. But that's not for any grand secrecy, if you will. So certainly Jacob and others are welcome to come hear more about the logistics or the building on the 26th, or anytime they want to swing by the museum. I'm happy to chat about it.
Okay. Jacob's also asking, will there be any open public green spaces or communal spaces?
Lots.
Always important in a project like this.
Yeah.
Anybody?
There's a ton. There was a deep commitment to that. This was one of those happy accidents when the Sky Bridge came offline. And again, I'll turn to Austin and Stephanie if there's something they want to talk about more specifically in terms of their design and their approach to that connectivity and creating sort of a city square, if you will, with several outdoor green spaces.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would love to mention our partners at Reed Hildebrand. They're landscape architects. They're truly top-notch designers. And when we talked about the challenges of going across William, they really came to the project with a very thoughtful and the envisioning of the space across William as sort of one public space. I think Austin could speak a little bit more to the specifics, but I think we're adding about 30 some small trees and permeable pavers and places to sit. So overall, the impact on the urban heat impact is being improved, like incredibly high.
Significantly. Yeah.
Yeah. But it will allow a lot of really nice outdoor places for people to sit under shade, in trees, and then there's an outdoor cafe component at the new building as well, which will be facing William.
I think Stephanie covered a lot of the big pieces, Jack. I think one of the really important pieces about the outdoor space is in response to some of the existing plaza, as everyone has experienced, is a very large space, and when it's full, it's really wonderful, and then when it's like all public spaces that are big plazas, when they're empty, they're empty. And one of the really important thing that this landscape and site design does is it creates a series of smaller groves and seating areas that which provide more ample shade and seating opportunity. This is a really big one because the museum is making a programmatic move to really focus efforts for the educational entrance right there where the existing entrance is and future phases, including I think potentially a makerspace down the line.
Yeah.
And so this is really all part of a larger site design to think through with a school bus drop off that now we could create some shaded pockets of seating for school groups to gather and start to then manage the arrival of groups into the existing museum entrance. And then also just to offer citizens of New Bedford a really wonderful place to sit and enjoy a great day outside. And that's really giving back in a really generous way. I think that's a really important piece for a project of this kind of scale and magnitude in the city is that it's really woven integrally into that city fabric, and everyone feels welcome to sit there and have a cup of coffee and really take in all that the museum has to offer or all that the district has to offer.
Yeah, I went to school in Boston, and I know City Hall Plaza is one of those big open spaces that
Yeah.
is great when there's a rally. But other than that, it can be, especially because it's a lot of concrete, um, be a little almost like a desert
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
or something. Um,
Jack, I'll also add just because as much as we're talking about the exterior, I want to note that the whole entire first floor is really designed to welcome people graciously, as we've been talking about. And our retail store will move across the street as well as the main front entrance, although people can still walk through and there will be ticketing and operating visitation on the existing site as well. But the core remainder of that first floor is designed as a community living room. So to
Mhm.
Austin's point of people being and gathering and hanging out on the outside, we're also really looking at this being a space that is enjoyed by residents and visitors on the inside as well.
Yeah, that was an important detail that was described in Arthur's story about a community space. It was,
Yes.
I guess the room with the whale skeletons functions that way now outside the
Mhm.
Jacobs Gallery, but
It
it's
does, and
smaller.
yet it's also got a lot of narrative panels that we put in a great exhibit, frankly, called Whales Today in 2018. But it did take offline the whale heart that has now become quite beloved as one of our larger artifacts that 9 teenagers can fit in.
Wow.
But it did take up floor space for just that, for that place to gather and just be and catch your breath and have a moment. And for our high school apprentices who have said, it has to have Wi-Fi. It will have
Yeah.
Wi-Fi. You could come and work there if you'd like. And we're gonna, when we get down the road further, we will certainly be looking to our community restaurants to coordinate some type of partnership because there will be a small cafe space there, not a restaurant, not a full scale sit down and order anything, but there you can get a cup of coffee and some grab and go treats, and we will want to partner with local businesses on that.
Nice. This is a question for Ashley. Chuck Smiler is writing in about the transportation connections
Mm.
with the new passenger rail that's coming in and wants to know whether there'll be a loop through the historic district. The Chuck says the present Serta bus routes and schedule do not match the announced T train schedules. I don't know about that, but obviously a connection is going to be important. Do you know anything about that?
So, we recently had a conversation with a nonprofit that is connected with the MBTA, and they're working to create some shuttle service from where passengers get off of the train to connect them to downtown. This will be a service that they're also going to be working with us, and we'll be connecting them with partners to talk about trip planning ideas, itineraries to offer for those riders. So that will all be part of the MBTA service. It's in the very early stages, but it's something that we're very excited about and something that's very important to us and our partners as that conversation has come up. How are we going to connect people from the train to our downtown historic area. And so those conversations are in place, and we'll have more information as that becomes developed.
Great. Our producer Dave Cuddy is going to put up some images now of uh, the designs for the new museum, and we can talk about those a little bit when he puts them up.
Sure.
I don't see them yet. Wow, beautiful. So there it is, Stephanie and Austin. Tell us about what you can see is you're looking from the plaza in front of the Jacobs Gallery toward the new addition across William Street, I think. Is that right?
Correct, correct. And then on either side in the foreground, you see some steps. And those steps are for both seating as well as they're leading to those sort of soft spaces that will have chairs and that are under tree cover. But you're looking towards the new project at 11 William, and as you can see, you're looking straight across, which is an uninterrupted, smooth paved walkway that leads from one entrance to the new entrance. And then we really did think a lot about what you see when you're walking across, right? And so I'm hoping that this image, although I think it'll even be more impactful as you get closer, you see the welcoming reception, you see the person at the counter, and then you see beyond that the stair that winds up to the temporary exhibitions gallery.
Look
I think it's
carefully
also,
at that. You can see that. There it is. There's the
Yeah.
stairway.
there you are.
Uh, if we can go back to the first photo, Dave, it does look like there's only room for a single vehicle to pass through on William Street from Bethel to North Water. Is that correct?
So it's actually it still is maintaining
Yeah.
it's 18 foot wide still as it comes through here, which is the same width. It's actually wider than a lot of the area further up William, where you have cars parked on both sides. When you have cars parked on both sides, William, the upper areas, it gets down to like 8 or 10 feet wide at some moment. So it's actually more generous just because the parking has been removed. But it would
Okay.
be a single lane through traffic is how it would function for individuals in vehicles to go down this last block of William Street. And there's still plenty of adequate room, as we talked about earlier, for where the bus drop off is. There's actually a dedicated pull off and still allows passengers and other vehicles to move past safely. The one piece I did want to touch on this really wonderful image is what Amanda was getting at about that community living room. Is you can see here in the foreground on the right side, this on the far side where all the glass is underneath the terracotta volume. That's the community living room, and really, it's in a wonderful location at the intersection of William and North Water Street, and it'll have view shed down Rodman Street to the harbor, which is really wonderful. We really loved that. It was kind of an amazing find that the center of this block also had this link in the city to down Rodman Street. And then on the left here, this glass volume that slides it out to the left is the retail space that Amanda was talking about. That's going to bring the store out of the wood building and into some more direct connection with the city and with other retail adjacencies that are already there and in our neighbors at the Corson building. So really wonderful things that the lower level of this building is thought about as these like smaller rooms that shift all together as part of this larger cohesive site.
And there we see the panorama that will be able to, much more of it will be able to be displayed in this expansive new
Mhm.
space. Austin, in that photo that we were looking at with the community living room, is that both indoors and outdoors, or is it just indoors?
So it's a great question, Jack. There will be a door to the right side of this image that'll connect from the indoors to the cafe, and then obviously there's the set of front doors here that you can see in the foreground of this image. So you'll be able to move indoor and outdoor in the seasons. There's not like a giant sliding door or anything like that from a museum's perspective. You want to keep a building tight and insulated well to protect collections and from a security standpoint. But we've worked really hard to have as much transparency and visual connection as possible in the way that this glass is detailed and the way that we're locating indoor and outdoor spaces adjacent to one another. We think this is going to be very successful.
It just looks wonderful, and the greenery with the trees. It looks like there's places to sit, maybe walls underneath those trees.
Yep.
It's just really really wonderful. Assistant City Planner Ann Laura was pointing out that people can find the plans on the city's website on the planning board
Yep.
of February 12th agenda. That evidently includes the plans if you want to go more in depth as to what they are. And this view here, you can see the double bank building with the Greek columns, right down there. It doesn't lose a thing. Some folks have said that they hope that the Whaling Museum can eventually get the double bank building, but we'll leave that for um, another day. This is all just wonderful. Let me ask Amanda how people can contribute if they haven't already.
Well, you can find me anytime.
Yeah.
So I will say what's amazing is I had talked before that we're just shy of 23 million. That's really from about 111 donors. So, like I said, the momentum has been extraordinary in what are our quiet phases of fundraising. But yes, you can be in touch with me. You can contact our capital campaign co-chairs, our Wick Simmons and Doug Crocker, who I know would be happy to chat with anyone as well about the building and its purpose and certainly supporting it.
Mm.
And Emily Mead, who is our Chief Philanthropy Officer. I should also note, you can find both any contact for me and Emily on the museum's website at whalingmuseum.org.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the coming Herman Melville statue, which
Oh,
we're
yeah.
all quite excited about. I just think it will add one more great dimension to the annual Moby Dick Marathon.
Yep.
And even though Melville was only in the city once, he obviously is a big part of the city's reputation.
Yeah.
And Lord, do you have joint ventures with the Siemens Bethel and the Marinus home that you must be involved with to
Oh,
take
yeah.
advantage of that when it comes?
Oh, I mean, they're phenomenal. We couldn't do the marathon without cooperation and partnership with them. I mean, we've got a long history, wonderful collaboration and partnership, including we hold their archive for them. I know they're working on some of their own storage space, but we're happy to kind of maintain it within our on-site collections. The they are so key to the marathon experience. I talked about it being kind of this progressive party throughout the museum, but it's certainly not lost on anyone the important part where we go across the street to the Bethel itself. For the very select few that get in there, and then it's broadcast within the museum. So we were thrilled. We had a member of our team, actually, one of our curators, Imelda Laxton, participated with one of our Melville scholars also on the design selection committee for the Melville statue. So we got to hear about it just tangentially about in terms of the exciting designs that came in. And I was there when the mayor announced it in the Bethel. It's going to be a pretty extraordinary installation. So really happy about that.
Great. So we've covered a lot. Is there any aspect of the new building or the project in general that I haven't touched upon that people would like to point out before we wrap up?
I'll offer, just the second floor. We've talked about it a
Mm.
little bit. You showed that great image. That's our largest gallery. That will be the Crocker Gallery. That's a 3,000 square foot gallery on its own that can hold a whole roll of the panorama. There are actually 6 galleries on that full floor altogether. So we can have one massive exhibit across 6,000 square feet, or we can break it down and have different smaller distinct shows or different, rotations within that gallery space. One of the really big things I get asked a lot of, don't you have a lot of gallery space? And we do have about 28,000 square feet of existing gallery space in our current building structures, but there's not one single one that's more than 2,000 square feet on its own. And where we're going organizationally, and much of the reason that this building is so important to us is that most traveling shows, when you bring in a show from another institution, or we package our own show and send it out, the minimum amount for those shows needs to be 5,000 square feet. So there's sort of this value proposition for both the shows we develop and put on the road, as well as shows that we would be bringing in that need to hit that threshold. So that was one of our real goals with working with the team from Machado Savetti, is to be able to achieve that minimum of 5,000 square feet. And we've been able to come out with 6,000 when all is said and done. So that's so important. As I noted in our 2024 statistics, it's not only who and how many people we're bringing into the city, and I know Ashley loves that, we do too, but it's also about the expansion of New Bedford and our historical narratives going well beyond the city and the region here, so that we see people connecting with the rich history of this area uh, far outside of our borders. And this building helps us sort of put that into an accelerated mode, if you will. But even frankly, it's really funny. I talk about the exhibit that was at Minnesota last year. When we looked at statistics for zip code visitation for the Moby Dick Marathon, for example, we drew in people from 37 states, and you can be sure we had increase in people from Minnesota. So these things
Mm.
connect from a business plan and a strategy.
Yeah, it's just a tremendously exciting project. When you come to the national exhibits, will it be one ticket for the national exhibits, and then people can go to the traditional Whaling Museum exhibits if they want? Have you thought about how it's going
Yeah,
to
we
work?
have thought about that a lot, Jack. We it's probably too premature for us to talk about operations because I honestly don't know yet. Right now, our special exhibits do not have an added cost to them. And so I don't want to commit one way or the other what we're going to do because I frankly don't know the cost of the exhibits that we'd be bringing in. So there's a piece there that's it's too early to commit one way or the other to that. The building itself, I think people are probably wondering, we talked about when the construction would start and demolition would start. The end goal is that this is open in early fall of 2026, just so people can have a sense of the timeline. So how we operate our admissions on both sides of the house is still too early for me to comment on completely. One of the things the museum has done in the last several years is we long ago committed to removing barriers to participation because I know museums are expensive. And we have over 20 different free and reduced admission programs. They're available on our website. It's called Ways to Save, right on our visit page. One of the important things to highlight is that we have, for a very long time, had 50% off admission for New Bedford residents across the board. So it's not a dollar amount off. We've always kept it at half price. So if costs go up, we always maintain that commitment that New Bedford residents get half price to our admissions.
Yeah, I think that's important to emphasize because sometimes, unfairly, I think the museum gets an elitist tag, and I don't think that that's merited at
Mm.
all. But
Thank you. Yeah.
you do have those programs, and you just have a
Yep.
score of educational programs for youth that this is going to make
We
even better,
do. I
I
mean,
think.
I talked a little bit about our high school apprenticeship program. That's 10 years in the making, or 15 years. It started in 2010. And that is a youth development program for New Bedford students, exclusively New Bedford students from low-income families that we underwrite fully. We have a number of supporters who cover the cost of that annually. They just came back, our apprentices came back from February vacation week down at the Marine Biological Laboratory at Woods Hole for a 3-day visit that was life-changing for some of them who have now committed to being marine biologists, which is pretty fantastic.
Mm.
But we extend, we give free memberships to every teacher, administrator, paraprofessional in the New Bedford Public School District. We give free membership so that I don't ever want a teacher to only experience the Whaling Museum when they're here on a visit with their students. I want them to be able to come on the weekends to our programs without that sort of cost or barrier to participate in the museum.
Final thoughts, Stephanie and Austin, about what you're hoping to achieve in this next year?
Um, I mean, I think we're super grateful to have had this collaboration. I mean, Amanda and her team are really a joy to work with, and we're really, I'm like super happy to get the opportunity to work in New Bedford. I've really, over the years, we've had a couple of projects in New Bedford, and it's just such a great city, super vibrant cultural city, and we're just really excited. Can't wait to see some things come up out of the ground.
Think one of the wonderful things about building projects is y- they just take an army of people, and it's in a huge collaborative effort at every step of the way of the institution at the city level, and now with partners that are going to build this building one day. But it's really a remarkable and wonderful thing to think about being able to contribute to the historic built legacy in New Bedford for our office, and I know for Stephanie and I personally. So we're really, really honored and really humbled even with this responsibility that we get to partner with everyone on this. So we're excited about it. It's going to be really, I think, transformative for the institution, transformative for downtown, and we think going to be beautiful and wonderful to visit time and time again.
Yeah, I agree. Final thoughts, Ashley?
This is just a really great time for New Bedford. We're seeing so much development and so much growth within the city. And like I said earlier, it makes my job easier. But it's not only great for tourism, but it's also really great for the residents of the greater New Bedford area. And I'm really looking forward to seeing everything that comes with this project.
Great. Well,
Jack, I
Amanda,
have one more. Can I add one more final thought, Jack, if you'll
absolutely.
indulge
We've
me?
got time.
Because it will wrap up everything you guys are saying, and deep appreciation, obviously, to the partnership with Machado Savetti and Ashley, always with you and your team at the city, and to Mayor Mitchell, who's really been a champion of this. We've appreciated immensely. I will leave people just knowing that the first two exhibits are already being thought through for this space, and the first one, because of timing, you're never exactly sure when we're going to open on the exact day. We wanted it to be deep in our own collection so we could control that. So that show will be a combination of a deep examination of a beautiful collection we have of William Bradford's along the lines of sort of an environmental and science-based approach. But the second show coming we've booked is from the Smithsonian. So again, the heft and the importance of this building and of this project is demonstrated by our first two shows. So we're just really excited.
Amazing.
Great. William Bradford, of course, the great seascape painter.
That's right.
Amanda, Stephanie, Austin, Ashley, thank you all. This has been very exciting stuff. I think it's going to be an exciting year for New Bedford, and we'll have a new expansion of the Whaling Museum and new Criterion Theater, and hopefully a new addition to the YMCA across the street. Right.
It's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
This has been
Thank
Jack
you.
Spillane for the New Bedford Light. Thanks for watching.